One revolution every 26,000 years.
So in this video, I'm going to kind of stretch out my explanations. I know I've been kind of brief with it, and this video is going to be about time and taking a little bit of what we've been talking about regarding space-time and time being relative and an individual experience based on who or what is experiencing it, into how we measure time in the world as we know it and how that affects human belief and religion throughout human history. So let's get going. First, we're going to be looking at the concept of time as a system of gears, and it's mostly just a way for me to illustrate the concept that there are cycles, within wheels, within spokes, and cogs, different measurements of cycles, different kinds of orbits, different ways of measuring harvests and using the stars to track our position in space. But also one of the oldest forms of history, or one of the oldest forms of studying where we are in space and studying how that affects us and how our position in space affects our lives, is astrology. Astrology is not something I dove into believing. I'm definitely more of a skeptical, evidence-based mind at first. And then what we'll find as we start studying this like kind of mystery teaching sort of thing is that it's about observation and correlation. And so if you have thousands of years of evidence that kind of lines up and you can create measurable charge, measurable expectations of certain cycles or certain events that take place at certain times, then you also have to kind of recognize that there's obviously stuff we still don't understand. And I'm not saying like Jesus is up there fucking spinning it like a bottle, but there are things in science that we don't understand, and now that we have the entire human knowledge basically at our fingertips, people are finding a lot more accessible knowledge that kind of connects dots. So this civilization from this part of the world at this certain time somehow used the same exact method that this place 1,000 years prior, with no way to geographically connect to the prior civilization, could possibly have met. So it's kind of just, whenever I talk about this stuff, we have to remember it's not fact. This is also my cumulative lessons from studying different writers and different teachings and stuff like that. And I will always just suggest that you look into your own stuff. So with the gears, we have certain cycles. Let's look at the cycles that we know about. So we'll start with our most basic. Let's look at the second, and then the minute, then the hour, then the day, then the month, then the year, century, millennia, so on and so forth. So on top of the mathematical measurement that we use for time, like the 60 seconds and minutes and hours in a day, we also have to address the breakdown of time in a more natural sense, meaning the passing of seasons, the equinoxes, and the solstices. Those are all things that are happening on a measured basis, but will happen regardless of our sense of time or measurement of it. And in fact, the passage of this time, the more natural sense of it, is what led us to develop the calendar system as we know it. I can dive into the calendar system a little bit, but basically it took a while. We had a few different calendars before we finally got this 365.25 days in a year, and that was right after Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar decided that the year was 365 days, but there's also enough time for Julius to add a day to July and Augustus to add a day to August, because they're dicks. So the Gregorian system came around, it was like slightly more accurate, and so we have the 365.25 blah blah that now constructs our day. So why is this stuff relevant? The breakdown of the calendar, the breakdown of time, also corresponds to our position according to the stars. And as I mentioned, people have been studying astrology and using it as like evidence to study our world and our human experience for thousands of years. And as our planet moves throughout our solar system, which moves throughout our galaxy, which moves blah, 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 we are in a relative area of these constellations that we know as the zodiac. So now I'm going to try to like set up a picture to kind of illustrate the orbit and its effect on our weather, and therefore on its effect on our harvests and our civilizations. So you have Earth sitting in space, and where we are stays relatively fixed to this system of constellations, the zodiac. You can call it the zodiacal wheel if you want, because as the Earth turns, we change positions according to those sets of constellations. And so as our world turns, we experience a zodiacal measurement of time, and each of those 12 slices of that zodiacal chart will theoretically impose certain expectations or certain trials or certain commonalities that every time Earth is in that sort of area, it highlights certain things. And as this sort of system of astrology developed, civilizations and cultures added their own sort of twists to it, and there's other systems of zodiac as well. So as Earth spins, we spin on an axis of 23.335 degrees away from the actual middle point of the Earth. And this axis affects our seasons, it affects how we measure time, it affects our weather, and also affects how we measure in astrology and the way that works. So let's look at Earth spinning at its normal rate, and it goes in and out of each chapter of the zodiac. And as that spins, we also look at a larger gear. We can call it a gear. It's a larger step of measuring time. And this measurement of time is not with just the spinning of the Earth, but a full rotation of the Earth's axis. So aside here, the Earth is spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And as Earth spins in and out of each chapter of the zodiac, the axis point is moving at a very, very, very slow revolution. So while the Earth is spinning faster, the axis point may be spinning, but the orbit that path has is a much slower, much bigger gear. So if I am born 9/9, this axis point is right here, and the Earth will spin and spin and spin and spin and spin, but not for just under 26,000 years will it reach this point. That is a great year. It is also known as a precession of the equinoxes. It is also known as the Yuga system, and it has a bunch of different breakdowns, but it's always the same numbers. Math is universal. As we break the bigger zodiac, the 26,000 year zodiac, into chapters, those are zodiacal ages. Zodiacal ages, age of Pisces, age of Aquarius, so on and so forth. Those are 2,160 years long each. And that helps with a ton of mythology, a ton of folklore, a ton of religion. For example, we're like just about age of Aquarius, and so we just left age of Pisces. Age of Pisces in the Western world has the icon or avatar of Christ. You think of him walking on water, him turning water into wine, him turning the one fish into many. Astrology does lay basically the foundation for whatever religious figure or mythical figure or main teacher of that zodiacal age. Before Christ was the age of Aries, and that by many researchers would be the icon would be considered Mithras, or the subject of Mithraism, and was represented by a ram. And so as we kind of dive into these like occult teaching, mystic teachings, a lot of it's astrology, a lot of it is based on time, and almost all of it is using time to break down periods in which we will be forced to challenge ourselves, and we either perpetuate what we've been doing or we break something and grow. So I know it kind of sounds hippy-dippy, especially if you don't buy into this stuff yet or ever. But essentially, all of these mystery teachings, all of this secret teaching kind of stuff, one of the biggest staples with all of it is the opportunity throughout time to see who you are, observe what you could change, and change it. And it's kind of frustrating to have such a simple solution, but I promise the more you study this stuff, the more it starts unlocking things and unfolding, and you're like, oh, I do have all of these opportunities to change things around me. You might not be able to change some of the bigger stuff right away, but you can take one day, one 24-hour, 60 minutes, 60 seconds, and one of those seconds you say, you know what, I'm not going to smoke that cigarette. And all of a sudden, you're 1% more likely to maybe not smoke another cigarette tomorrow. It seems so silly to tie a 26,000-year cycle to something as small as not smoking a cigarette, but I promise that's what a lot of this stuff is talking about. For example, if we use the concept of the cycle breaking down into steps, let's look at the major arcana. The major arcana is 22 cards. You start as a fool and then end up as the whole world. Jung's archetypes, there's 22 archetypes in which every role that you fulfill in that, you learn different skills and become a better version than when you started. You have Joseph Campbell's system of the hero's journey, where you start off as a fool or a knave and end up being a Jedi. Star Wars is one of the most famous representations of Joseph Campbell's work. Like, obviously, it's not Joseph Campbell, but George Lucas based this Luke Skywalker and his journey on the hero's journey developed by Joseph Campbell. On top of that, you also have the 22 steps of the Tree of Life, or the Hebrew Kabbalah, and each 22 paths break down into things you need to learn. Balance between mercy and justice, balance between strength and reservation, prudence. It's everywhere, and it's all the concept of looking at yourself and making yourself better, and not looking so much to the rest of the world all the time, because there are going to be things that work for you that don't work for anyone else. So this is another reason it's like the mystery secret teaching, is because no one can let you cut in line. You can't suddenly become that much more experienced because it's you that you're working on. So hopefully that either intrigues you or makes you sure that you never want anything to do with this. So let's carry on. So I'm going to briefly talk about equinoxes and solstices. So if you're on Earth, which I imagine you are, the position of where you are, the Earth's axis, and the sunlight is coming from is going to play an effect on your climate, your harvests, and your civilization will likely build its sort of rhythms and systems based on the passage of time, and the most consistent measurement of time throughout human history tends to be the solstices and equinoxes. So what are they? They are, the shortest day, the longest day, so on and so forth. But the position of Earth compared to the sun is also very relevant for this. So we have the sun, and it's shining light on Earth. And as that axis moves, we have one point where the axis is as close to the sun as it will be. This is the summer solstice. So the summer solstice is the day in which it is closest in its orbit. The axis is closest in its path to sunlight. An equinox is equally distant. So that's the middle ground, that's spring and fall. So civilizations throughout human history have used these to build cities, to build temples, to build gardens, to build everything, because they know that if they optimize their situation according to the planet that they're on and according to that planet's offerings of weather or time or the things that change throughout time, that seems to be the ones, the cities that flourish, or the cultures that flourish. You can see this all across the world, all throughout time. So that's basically where we're going to stop for now. I'm still working with what size bite is enough. Another thing that you'll see with these teachings is that as soon as you dip a toe in one thing, it's like, oh, geez, well, I should talk about this. I should talk about this because this relates to that. But then we're going to end up doing 6-hour videos because everything ties to something else. So I hope this is a little bit more clear. And yes, I guess that's it for now. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.